My steps after loss. Hi everyone. I wasn't sure I could make this video. It's a deeply personal topic, and even now it's still very raw for me. But over the last couple of months, so many of you have reached out asking what actually happens after your spouse passes away. And what are the steps that you have to take? So today I'm sharing my experience after losing my husband, Norm. Not because it's easy to talk about, but because I want to help others who may be walking this same painful road. If this video helps even one person feel a little more prepared and a little less alone, then it's worth sharing. Those first few days after losing Norm felt like moving through fog. There were calls to make, papers to sign, lots of questions. I didn't even know how to answer them, honestly. I just wanted time to stop. That's why I made this list, not as legal advice, but as a guide to help you see the path more clearly when everything feels impossible. These are the practical steps that I took, not the emotional or the spiritual ones, because everyone's heart heals in their own way. One of the biggest ones was providing direction for the hospital. When your spouse passes away in a hospital or a care home, the staff will ask you what to do next. I didn't realize how quickly that moment would come until I was standing beside Norm's hospital bed. If possible, make arrangements ahead of time with either a funeral home or a service provider so that everybody knows who to call. In our case, Norm and I had actually gone and pre-prayed our funeral. It was actually about 2 years ago that we did it. So when the time came, my son made a phone call. But what I will say is that it actually all happened so quickly. We were sat there, and yes, I remembered the name of who we had booked it with. But that was all. And I remember saying to my son, this is the name. He had to get his cell phone out, Google it, find the phone number, and then he called, and then the service provider took over. But in those few minutes when we were sat there, really, it was very frightening, and you really don't know how to handle that situation. So once my son had called him, that then gave me real peace of mind at a time that we were already heartbroken. And also, my son called the provider in the evening. It was about 8 o'clock at night. And he told my son that Norm had been actually picked up about 40 minutes after the phone call. And that was so reassuring that Norm hadn't been left in a hospital morgue, that he had been picked up and he was now being cared for. So I think a big tip that I would say is write the name and phone number down of your chosen provider. Have it on a little small card, a bit like a business card. Have it in your wallet so that if this should happen to you, you actually have the name and number there, because it happened to us and we didn't have it. And then one of the next big steps is that you will meet with your funeral or service provider. We did this actually the very next day, and I was actually surprised at just what you had to do. They do say you can meet within 1 or 2 days. We met the next day. This is a very important step because the provider actually has to register the death. So, in actual fact, for him to do that, you do have to take along some important documents. I had to actually take the proof of marriage, strangely enough, to prove that I was Norm's spouse. I had to take a copy of the will and also photo identification to actually prove who I was. And it was strange because I do remember 2 years ago when we actually set this process up, he had asked us to take the marriage certificate. And you know what? Life got busy. I forgot and didn't. But when actually somebody passes away, you actually have to prove you were married. And you know what? It also, sometimes it felt surreal to have to do all this paperwork so soon. But this step is required, and it's a step that has to follow in place. The service provider guided us through everything that we had to do, and he actually took us through the process with a lot of kindness, and it did make me feel good. And I think it was then that I realized the true value of having plans in place. Should this happen, you actually then have it in place before, and it takes over and makes it a lot easier for you. So the next step will be that you need to get copies of the death certificate. In our case, it was about 3 to 4 business days, and we then had another meeting where we got the official death certificate. We were actually given 10 copies and didn't realize at the time how important that would be because so many people need them, whether they're banks or government departments, insurance people, or just it seems that anybody you talk to needs a copy of the death certificate. So perhaps your funeral director or provider might only give you 1 or 2 death certificates. If that's the case, I would recommend that you order some more or take the ones that you get to have them notarized by a lawyer locally in your town. That would get you some more extra copies. The next very important step is to notify the federal government. Once you have the death certificate, contact your country's main government service. For me and Canadians, that's Service Canada. For Americans, that's Social Security. And for the UK, it's HM Government. They will handle the pension and benefit updates. They will cancel identification and prevent further payments from being issued, because the last thing you want is to get payments you're now not entitled to, then you've got to pay them back. Doing this quickly avoids identity theft and also can prevent if you have to have repayment issues down the road, which you don't want to deal with. You might also be able to apply for a death benefit. Ask about the benefits right away if there is something in your country that you can apply for. In Canada, it's the CPP death benefit. In the US, it's the Social Security lump sum. And in the UK, it's the bereavement support payment. These programs can help with immediate costs and sometimes include ongoing survivor benefits that you might find that you are entitled to. A tip I would mention here is apply as soon as possible. Most programs do actually have a time limit on how you can get these benefits in place. I think one of the next very important ones is to update the ownership of joint property and insurance. You have to update ownership of joint assets. If this is your home, vehicle, or even insurance, Even if it's something that was jointly owned, you still have to formally transfer it to your name and have the other person's name taken off. I also had to re-register our car and trailer because they were both in Norm's name. So I had to have those put into my name. And to do that, I actually had a copy of the will and death certificate. They need those before they will process the paperwork. Another very important step is to notify the family doctor if you have one. Now, in our case, our doctor had already been notified from the hospital that Norm had passed, but we called just to make sure that they did know, so that all his medical records would be updated, and so that perhaps further down the road, I wouldn't get phone calls saying Norm was scheduled for this appointment or that appointment. By notifying them, that removes that and takes care of things that you might find upsetting down the road. And it also meant that his medical file was all updated properly. Because just remember, further down the road, all this brings up, takes you back and reopens wounds that maybe you're trying to heal from. So I felt good at doing that. Another very big one is to notify all the financial institutions. This is probably the part that I would say has been the most overwhelming. All these different financial places all have their own set of rules, whether it's a bank, whether it's a credit card company, or an investment firm. They all have their own rules, and you have to kind of talk to them and work through diligently what they want. You will also need a copy of the death certificate and a copy of the will, especially if you're going to close or transfer any accounts. And I've mentioned before, if it's a joint account, you actually have to legally have that person removed off so that the account becomes just in your name. You also have to, by law, legally cancel all credit cards that are in your spouse's name. And although we had one that was in Norm's name and I was a card holder on it, the minute we told them, the card was cancelled straight away. So that cancelled my card and my travel insurance too on the spot. I must admit, I was really surprised at that. That was a bit of a shock. Because what happens is that you might have automatic payments that go through every month on there. So because we actually worked with them, they kept it open for another 2 weeks so that I could cancel all the automatic payments that were going to go on the credit card. So that was helpful. Another thing that I was really surprised at was that if you had any loans or any personal lines of credit, so the thing that I was surprised at was because they were in both our names, Norm and mine, they instantly cancelled all of them. They said that because lending products were issued on the fact that there's two people of you, and now that your income is going to be different, I automatically apparently didn't count. It didn't even matter how much money you have. They just cancelled all of them. That was a big surprise. So if you are thinking you might need a loan or you might need a personal line of credit, I suggest you go and maybe open one in your own name, just in case you might need this in the future. I also want you to open up an estate account. Not everybody's property has to go to probate, but there are some times that they might, if there is something that's maybe just in one name only, you will have to open an estate account that will be monitored and looked after by whoever is the executor of your will. So a big tip I would say here is, and I have a couple of files that we have at the moment, is write everything down. as you talk to these people, if you're printing off a piece of paper, write down the name you spoke to them, what happened, if there's a follow-up meeting, because these things could take weeks and months. And believe me, you are going to forget what time you went to see somebody and what you talked about. So write it all down, put it in a folder or a file. And I think it's helping me, so it might help you. Organize and secure all these documents. So as you start this paperwork process of going through, you're going to end up that you will have copies of the will, you'll have copies of the death certificate, and you will also get paperwork from the banks, insurance companies, saying that you've cancelled this and cancelled that. You don't know how you're going to need all this paperwork in the future. So either get yourself a binder, put it all in there, or in my case, I got a firebox. And now all my documents are in the firebox. And actually, I did a movie about that. That might help you. So I'll put the link to it in the description. And now I know where all my documents are. I've even put in there my own birth certificate, my marriage certificate, because I had no idea who might actually need all these. So I think that's very important. Write it all down and keep it all in one place. I think the next point is so important, and you might not think of this as being important at all, and that is you need to update your own will. Because if you look and you don't update your own will, you probably have your spouse, for example, most of us had the spouse or as an executor or the main beneficiary. In my case, everything that was mine, my beneficiary was Norm, who now Norm has passed away. So in reviewing and doing a brand new will for myself and naming my new beneficiaries, then that takes away that problem. Because you wouldn't think about this, but should something happen and you hadn't updated your own will, everything would then go into the estate that you'd only just set up for the person who's just passed. And that would actually be a nightmare for your family left behind. So you need to remove your spouse's name. You need to choose new beneficiaries and look at your power of attorney and healthcare directives. It's not easy to think about, but it does ensure that your wishes stay clear and prevents legal complications for your family later. If you've recently lost someone like I have, please know you are not alone. These steps can help you move forward piece by piece, but healing takes time, patience, and self-compassion. When Norm passed, I didn't know where to begin. It was a nightmare, it was a fog. But every little small task that I've completed has helped to give me a little bit of peace of mind, and it's giving me a little bit more strength to move on. So I'm hoping that me telling my story might help you. If you have walked this road, please share in the comments below what's helped you most, because your words might help somebody else just beginning theirs. And you know what? They might help me too. And if you've enjoyed this video, you might like to watch the next video, which we'll put a link down here as well. And as always, let's stay strong together.